Well, hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. Tonight I'm joined by my friend and the host of Around the World with D and Friends, D. Pierce. Hi,
Good.
D. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be talking about these important topics.
Okay, happy to have you here. Our topics for tonight are a new TRO. What's a TRO? It's a temporary restraining order. And then there's the issue of creative ideas for the sovereign wealth fund, or an alternative to the sovereign wealth fund. And we have a piece from Stephanie Kelton on that. And then we have some information on new China weapons.
Ooh,
China's been rapidly advancing in the area of new weapons, and we're going to hear about those weapons tonight. Then we have a piece from Alistair Crook uh, on the greatest geopolitical showman's inside out political solution. I wonder who the showman in question is.
hmm
And then finally, we have a discussion of what went on at the Valdai conference. That's an annual conference they hold in Russia.
hmm
And in this one, they were confronting, among other things, they were confronting the American problem in West Asia. And Pepe Escobar reports on that. So let's get going by sharing on Facebook.
Yes.
That's always very important.
Yes, it is. Let everybody know you're live.
Yes, helps to get the folks here.
Oh, Colby's crying here.
I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, so let's get started with the first of our pieces, and that comes from Common Dreams. It was late breaking today. It was late breaking for me because I had the show all set and then I came across this. But what it's about is no Elon, or blocking Elon anyway. A protester wears a sticker with a crossed out Elon symbol during a rally in front of the U.S. Treasury Department, Washington, D.C. on February 4th. Demonstrators gathered to protest the access Elon Musk had to the Treasury Payment System, which stores the private information of millions of Americans. This photo was by Hossein Fatemi, and it's from Middle East Images. Anyway, the headline is, quote, "No one is above the law. Judge blocks Musk wrecking crew from the Treasury payment system." Tagline is New York Attorney General Letitia James, also known as Tish James, who led 19 state attorney generals in filing a suit, said the emergency order will keep, quote, "the world's richest man from accessing Americans' private uh, data." And this piece was written by John Kelly for Common Dreams on February 8th, 2025, which is today, of course. Okay. A federal judge early Saturday morning blocked Elon Musk's highly controversial Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, from further access to a sensitive and closely guarded Treasury Department payment system, warning, of irreparable harm, quote unquote, presented by the threat to the personal and financial data of millions of Americans. But in an emergency order that followed from a lawsuit filed by 19 state attorney generals, or I should say attorneys general, on Friday, U.S. District Judge Paul A. Engelmayer said the Treasury Department, in addition to suspending Musk and his team from access, must, quote, immediately destroy any and all copies of the downloaded material from the Treasury Department's records and systems, if any. So, of course, just a comment on that. That's an order. It may be some of Elon's people will try to defy this order. Okay, but if it comes out later that they defied this order, then there's going to be a contempt of court citation against them. And if Trump tries to pardon them for that, there can be civil contempt of court proceedings filed against them. And Trump can't protect them against that, but maybe it would be possible for Elon Musk to do so by digging into his resources. But for some reason, I don't really see him doing that. In the coalition's lawsuit led by New York Attorney General Tish James, the states argued that allowing Doge personnel who haven't been characterized as far-right libertarian, quote, goons, unquote, and a, quote, a demolition crew, unquote, intent on gutting federal agencies from the inside out. Access to the Treasury system was unlawful in the first place and could give them the ability, quote, to block federal funds to states and programs providing healthcare, childcare, and other critical services, unquote, none of which they are authorized to do. And there's a link here to a Twitter post, which has a link inside of it to the actual decision. I'm not going to read the actual decision, but if you go to the piece, you can get that link. And with 2 clicks, you can get to the actual decision. So Judge Engelmayer, in his decision, said the named defendants in the suit, President Donald Trump, his Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and the Treasury Department, will be compelled to show cause at a hearing on February 14th before a separate judge presiding over an existing challenge to Doge access to the system. I don't know who that is, but I'm just going to take this for a second. Hello. I'm right in the middle of the stream, so I'll have to call you back afterwards. Bye. Okay, so his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, in the Treasury Department, will be compelled to show cause at a hearing on February 14th before a separate judge presiding over an existing challenge to Doge's access to the system. In a statement following the ruling, I'll turn off my phone now, James said, quote, this morning, we want a court order blocking Elon Musk, the world's richest man, from accessing Americans' private data. Musk and his Doge employees must destroy all records they've obtained. I'll say it before and I'll say it again, no one is above the law, unquote. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court seems to differ on that question. Under the order, as the Washington Post reports, quote, the Trump administration is prohibited from giving access to political appointees, special government employees, or government employees that are not assigned to the Treasury Department. So there it is. Pretty explicit prohibition. On Friday, Wired reported that an internal agency at Treasury, that's the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, by the way, had assessed the DOGE personnel placed inside the department as, quote, an insider threat, unquote. Quote, again, there is ongoing litigation, congressional legislation, and widespread protests relating to DOGE's access to Treasury and the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, unquote, reads a section of an email from the internal agency reviewed by the news outlet. Quote again, if DOGE members have any access to payment systems, unquote, the email continued, and quote again, we recommend suspending that access immediately and conducting a comprehensive review of all actions they may have taken on these systems, unquote. I probably should add to all this just a comment. If I were them and I wanted to do what they want to do, what I would have done upon getting in there and getting right access to the system would have been to place a back door inside the software, so whatever happened, I would be able to get into the system at some future time. Just saying. Now, I don't know if they did that or not, but I know it's perfectly possible for them to do that and then to ghost their intervention into the system so that it might not be possible to learn that they had done that. I don't know how the judge is going to get around that. I don't know how the Bureau is going to get around that kind of possibility. I'm hoping that Trump's software people were not so good at COBOL that they could do that. Okay, but of course, I don't know anything about that. But just on its face, this court order is a very good one. It should put a stop to any mischief they have been doing in the system, if not immediately, over a few days. Of course, I do hope to see a notice that my Social Security check is pending arrival in my checking account in just a couple of days.
That's good news.
Yeah, well, I hope to find that out. But if I don't find that out, I'll know what went wrong.
Right.
It's going to be Doge, and I'm going to be hopping mad, and millions of Americans across the nation are going to be hopping mad, and there are going to be protests in front of the Treasury Department and protests in front of the White House, and people are going to be screaming bloody murder about where's their effing Social Security check. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you already saw it pending.
No, I didn't see it pending. I probably will see it pending on Sunday night or Monday morning at the latest. It's not really fully official till Wednesday. Okay, but I get paid by them on the second Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
So that is this coming Wednesday, but they're always a bit early with it in terms of actually making the funds available, even though it's not fully official yet.
Right. They just let you know so you feel comfortable that it's pending.
They let you know, but they also make the funds available,
Oh, okay.
even though it's not on the ledger yet.
Okay.
So that's all very interesting. But okay, going on with the next piece. Shall I put it up for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, uh, that's a new piece by Stephanie Kelton,
Mm-hmm. It's good.
brand new today,
Fresh off the press.
and written with her usual flair. And I'm sure you'll have a good time with it, Dee.
Oh, that's good.
So here it is. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so
Here we go. The lens. Trump's executive order to rename debt and deficits. Stephanie Kelton, and February 8th, 2025. Last week, I wrote about Trump's executive order to begin the process of establishing a sovereign wealth fund for the United States. The administration sees it as a way to turn a relatively small pile of cash into a much bigger slush fund, which could then be used to invest in domestic industries, buy TikTok, or whatever. But since the U.S. runs neither budget surpluses nor large trade surpluses, anyone everyone is wondering where the Trump administration expects to quote find the small pile of cash to send the SWF in the first place. Trump has floated the idea of directing revenue from tariffs into the SWF, and the fact sheet that accompanied his executive order pointed to a quote vast sum of highly valued assets that can be invested though a sovereign wealth fund for a great long-term wealth generation. To turn those highly valued assets into cash on the books, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the U.S. will, quote, monetize the asset side of the federal balance sheet.
okay, so okay, we ought to remember here that when the CARES Act was passed, uh, there was $460 billion
Mm-hmm.
that uh, was put into a fund. Okay, in other words, the first thing that happened was the 4.6 billion got appropriated by Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then the Federal Reserve uh, created, I'm sorry, the 460 billion, I should say, created 460 billion in the Treasury spending account. And the Treasury spending account sent that 4.6 the 460 billion up to the Federal Reserve. So the Secretary of Treasury sent it over to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve then created a loan fund, which was worth 4.6 trillion dollars, which could be drawn down upon uh, by corporations, because this was supposed to be backing for corporations.
Mm-hmm.
What the corporations did with the $4.6 trillion is nothing. They just let it sit there, and having the backup of $4.6 trillion then allowed them to go back and uh, uh, to buy their own stock, on credit. And everybody thought this was a very good thing because they were backed by the $4.6 trillion at the Federal Reserve. And so the corporations, very large corporations, uh, were profiting because of this fund. Basically, the asset side of their balance sheet, okay, was monetized by this fund that was sitting at the Federal Reserve, and that was leveraged by 10 times at the Federal Reserve. So this is one way of kind of doing things, which had been done in the past. Okay, of course, another way is, I'm fond of telling people, is that they could take a $200 billion platinum coin, and they could put it into the sovereign wealth fund. Okay, and then they could, maybe buy some Bitcoin with it. And the result of buying the Bitcoin would be that it would drive the price of Bitcoin up from $100,000 today to perhaps $1 trillion. And so then the Bitcoin sitting in the sovereign wealth fund would suddenly be worth $1 trillion rather than, $200 billion. So these are games they can play once they have that, sovereign wealth fund. But going on with the article, please go on with it, D.
Okay. As Gillian Tech reported in the Financial Times yesterday, one of the assets that might be slated for the monetization scheme is gold. The idea is that the U.S. Treasury could revalue America's gold stocks, which are currently valued at $42.22 per troy ounce in national accounts. If they were accounted for at current market values, around $2,800 an ounce, TET reports that, quote, it could inject $800 billion into the Treasury general account via a repurchase agreement. By topping up the balance in the TGA, the move would also create additional breathing room with the debt ceiling limit, since Treasury could issue fewer bonds.
Okay, the TGA is, of course, the Treasury General Account, but that is the spending account of the federal government, the main spending account, okay, the federal government.
Or, as Larry McDonald put it in the Bear Trap report on February 2nd, quote, it's time to get creative around the asset side of Uncle Sam's balance sheet. Huh.
Get creative.
This whole thing is so crazy.
I know.
TET acknowledges that this is all highly speculative. At this point, Secretary Bessent hasn't indicated that revaluing America's gold stock is part of the president's plan, but she suggests that investors would be wise to take the prospect seriously because, quote, Bessent has an incentive to be creative, given the scary fiscal hole. Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Okay, so basically, she's suggesting that America's investors maybe should invest a lot in gold. Okay, but gold on the open market currently costs $2,800 an ounce. Okay, so the point is, what it's going to be revalued to, is already there. Okay, so maybe it would be a better investment for the federal government uh, if they want to get more assets in. Okay, is to buy Bitcoin, because if they put in 200 billion into Bitcoin, that is going to drive Bitcoin up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, please go on.
If you've followed this newsletter for some time, then you know that I don't subscribe to the dominant view that the U.S. is facing a scary fiscal hole.
And by the way, that applies to all three of us, to
Mm-hmm.
me, to Dee, and to Stephanie.
Exactly. And I see Sandy Degg is in the audience, Steve Wolfbrandt, Lana Dell. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, please continue. You're at unfortunately.
Mm.
Okay, let's see. I'll put my cursor on it for you.
Oh, unfortunately, the current Trump administration, unlike Trump 1.0, hasn't adopted the more cool-headed understanding that comes from embracing an MMT functional finance perspective on debt and deficits. So, they're looking for creative ways to stitch up the numbers: tariffs, mass layoffs, monetizing assets, etc., in order to show that they're addressing the quote scary fiscal hole.
And here's a quote uh, from the man himself.
Balanced budget, DJT, Donald J. Trump. I'd much
Sure, he's going to balance the budget. Sure.
That's him. Yep, at real Donald Trump. I'd much rather see Trump calling out the genuine fake news that passes for informed commentary in virtually every corner of the financial press. So I've got a creative idea of my own. Issue an executive order to ban the use of the words debt and deficit as they relate to the government's financing in all federal communications and rename them. So instead of the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, producing a table like this, the Budget Outlook fiscal year.
Okay, so it will scroll down the table. Okay, then at the bottom of the table, we see the total deficit. We see at the top of the table is years. So let's see, it's hard to see that, I'm afraid. Oh, yeah, I can see it better now. She gives an average from 1974 to 2023. Then she gives the actual for 2023. And then she gives the projected figures for 2024, 2025, and 2034. And she does this as percent of GDP. And she does the same thing in billions of dollars. Okay, so when you scroll down there and you get to the bottom, what you see is a total deficit. The first column again is the average from 1974 to 2023, and as a percent of GDP, the deficit is a minus figure, so it's minus 3.7. The primary deficit is 1.6. What they mean by the primary deficit is it's the size of the deficit with the net interest taken out of it. So you see the total deficit was 3.7. Okay, the net interest was 2.1. So the primary deficit was minus 1.6. And that follows for all the columns. In other words, it's computed in the same way. Then there's the debt held by the public, at the end of each period. The average debt up until but 2023 was $48.3 billion, because in the early years, the debt was relatively small. But then in what was it? What's the actual 2023 size of the debt as a percentage of GDP was 97.3%. Okay, I should have read the average debt held by the public at the end of each period for the period from 1974 to 2023. It was 48.3%. Okay, then in 2023, it was 97.3%. 2024, the projected value was 99.0%. Let me see the year. in 2025, it's projected at 101.6%. In 2074, it's projected 122.4%. Okay, in this table. So the average from 1974 to 2023 was 26.2 trillion. Then in 2023, it was 28.2 trillion, I guess. In 25, okay, it's projected to be 30.2 trillion. And in 2034, it's projected to be $50.7 trillion. So, of course, everybody looks at this and they freak out. What? We're going to be $57 trillion. We're now at, in 2025, $30.2 trillion or whatever that figure is. But instead of seeing that, she wants to define the notions of deficits and debts. So here's the table. And then you drop to the bottom. And of course, instead of deficit, she wants to say, what is the total net financial contribution uh, of, of, of the government to the non-government sector? And so you can see that the averages, okay, are going up, that over the period 1974 to 2023, the contribution was at 3.7%. Okay, she should have changed the signs here. Okay, put in plus 3.7% because, of course, it's a net, financial contribution. She's trying to make that point. So I think she made a mistake with this table. She should have said plus 6.2%, plus 7.0%, plus 6.5%, and plus 6.9%. And then the same thing with the net financial contribution less the interest paid. So there should be plus signs in front of all that. And then here she wants to call the national debt subject to the limit, the cumulative historical financial contribution. And so it would average 18.3 trillion per year between 1974 and 2022. Then it would rise to 97.3 trillion, 99.0 trillion. Oh, I'm sorry, these are percentages. Okay, so the percentages would be the same, but there would be a plus sign, okay, in front of it because they're historical financial contributions. Okay, I have to send her a message and tell her she's made a mistake with this table with the signs. Anyway, okay, and then of course in trillions of dollars, the average from 1974 to 2023 is 26.2 trillion. 2024, 28.2 trillion. 2025, 30.2 trillion. And then 50.7 trillion. These are figures that had come from the Congressional Budget Office. And so she wants to label the last three rows in this table. Okay, please go on with the article, D.
Okay, and I just want to say hello to Lisa. Lisa Theobald is here.
Hello, Lisa. How you doing?
And John B. Hello, John B.
Hi, John B.
And unlike renaming geographic landmarks, this would not be some petty gesture. It would tell people what actually happens when outlays exceed revenues. It would explain that the government is adding dollar-denominated financial assets to the non-government sector. Over the entire sweep of history, the federal government has put nearly 29 trillion into our hands. That means that over the centuries, the federal government has contributed in total enough to buy about 1 year's worth of GDP. Don't call it the quote public debt. Call it the government's cumulative financial contribution.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Once the federal government assigns the debt and deficit more accurate and meaningful names, the financial press will follow. And then we can stop being tormented with headlines and commentary and quote fiscal holes and quote debt crisis and get down to real economics. And that's the truth.
It is indeed the truth. Okay, there is a little video here. If it's not too long, should I play it?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Welcome, fellow Republicans. To start with the old business, Brother Hibbert will read a report on our efforts to rename everything after Ronald Reagan.
All Millard Fillmore schools are now Ronald Reagan's. The Mississippi River is now the Mississippi Reagan.
And my good friend Frankenstein is now Franken Reagan. Blah!
Excellent.
That's cute.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, that was Stephanie's creative idea for today. And I was happy to see that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at some comments now.
Sounds like a good idea.
See where we are in comments. I should have given a chance for some comments after the first article, but I forgot. So people keep saying, oh yeah, here we go. No, there were a lot of comments, weren't there?
Yep.
See, I will wager Trump will pardon Elon in 2027. Both should face prison time. I think Trump may have to pardon Elon now. Farsi says civil court, hopefully. Doc, if Elon is viewing nuclear info, he's doing it without a compartmentalized clearance. Yes, I have heard they've been in the energy department. Okay, and the NRC is within the Department of Energy. So, they might be viewing, the nuclear info. Also, there are payment details for the Department of Energy, which probably involve some of the nuclear stuff. So Friar Steve is right. He's doing it without a compartmentalized security clearance. So he is going to need a pardon for that. Because if the Democrats ever get back into power, of course, they would probably prosecute him for violating classification laws. Friar Steve is right. They should not be looking at that info. The Earl of Lurie and Steve, and also Steve Wolfbrand, exchange greetings. Friar Steve exchanges greetings, gave with Evelina. Doc, no one should put backdoors in government systems. No one. I completely agree. And of course, I would never have gone in there in the first place knowing it was illegal. But I'm saying if I were them and I had the same very malign intentions they have, then that's the first thing I would have done is put back doors in, right? I mean, wouldn't you have done that if you were in their place? Sandy says, hello, Steve, Evelina, Joe and Bonnie and Dolores. Hello, Sandy. Sandy says, we better get ours. Supposedly those are not being held up. Well, so they say. But of course, if they were mucking around in a payment system and they screwed up the payment system, then they may inadvertently have delayed our checks. Sandy says, I'm watching a show with Tucker Carlson and Musk. Is pretty interesting, and it's a two-part interview. I'm sure it's interesting. I think that Musk is frequently very, very interesting. I mean, you know, he's got all kinds of ideas, and a lot of them are way out, so he's interesting. Lana says, happy Saturday. Steve says, hi, Lana. Sandy says, can you buy goods with Bitcoin? Who takes it? I don't think I can use it at Aldi. I think that's a good point. Okay, so if the Sovereign Wealth Fund had some Bitcoin in it and the government wanted to spend any of it, what it would have to do was sell the Bitcoin first. Of course, if it sold any appreciable amount of Bitcoin, it would be tanking the market for Bitcoin. Okay, so periodically there would be ups and downs on that market, depending on whether the government was putting in more Bitcoin or was, you know, taking out Bitcoin so it could spend it. Steve Wolfman says, smoke and mirrors. Sandy leaves an icon, which I can't see very well, and she waves. And Lana says, hey, Steve. And Forrest says, yes, you can buy goods with Bitcoin. Okay, it is, you know, like using a credit card. Some goods. I don't think Aldi is accepting Bitcoin. Pretty sure about that. And the federal government will not accept it in payment of taxes. Friar Steve says, do you have Cash App? You can use Bitcoin on your Cash App. Interesting. No, I don't have Cash App, but if I'm buying Bitcoin to use Cash App, I might as well use my cash. Steve Wolfman says, hi, Sandy. Hi, Steve W. Lisa says, hi, folks. The Earl of Lurie says, at Lisa Theobald, and waves. And Steve Wolfman says, hi, Lisa. Abandoning Bitcoin finally is El Salvador. Conditions set forth by the foreign minister in order for Bukele to get the dollars he requested. Okay. As I understand it, Joe, says John B., the platinum coin addresses the debt ceiling political issue, but doesn't change the prevailing ongoing national debt. The much demonized debt number still exists. Well, John B., that depends on the size, okay, of a platinum coin. If, for example, you minted $100 trillion platinum coin, okay, and you placed it in the public enterprise fund of the mint, okay, at the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve, of course, would be compelled to credit the coin, okay, with $100 trillion. Then the seigniorage could be swept by the Treasury Department into the Treasury General Account. And the money, nearly the $100 trillion that's in the Treasury General Account, but could be used for two things. Okay, it could be used to spend the appropriations of Congress, and it could also be used to repay the debt. But if you don't want to have any inflation as a result of it, what you have to do is repay the debt and the interest on the debt as it falls due. So that would change the prevailing ongoing national debt terrorism, because people would see, if they were looking at the daily Treasury statement, that by 6 months in, the national debt would have fallen an appreciable amount. By the end of 1 year, okay, it would have fallen by a huge amount, because most of the Treasury debt, it's ongoing, of course, because it's, rolled over. But a very high percentage of the Treasury debt is actually short-term debt between 3 months and 1 year. So by the end of 1 year, okay, I don't know the figure, I'd have to look it up, but I'd estimate that at the end of 1 year, 50% of the national debt would be paid off. So instead of having a national debt of $36 trillion at this point, we might well have a national debt at the end of the first year of $18 trillion. Of course, $18 trillion would then be gone from the Treasury general account. Okay, but that's all right, because it was, short-term debt anyway. Lisa Theobald says, "Hi, Steve," and leaves a heart with a white cross in it. John B. says, okay, the neoliberals. Oh, if you want to see this described and detailed and accounted for, okay, in detail, then go to my Kindle book on fixing the debt. Okay, it's at Amazon. It retails for $9.99. And it's the most comprehensive treatment of the platinum coin, the criticisms of it, what can you do with the platinum coin, okay, and so on. So it's the only book on the platinum coin so far. So John B. says, the neolibs austerity-producing political scare campaign will still go on. Well, as I just explained, no, it would not still go on. It would be dead by the end of the first year, probably dead by the end of the first 6 months or so. Even then, I'm being pessimistic. A considerable amount of the short-term debt would be paid over the first 3 months. So Evelyn says, for 3 years, he based his economy on Bitcoin when only 1 in 10 Salvadorians had access. He was an idiot. Lisa said, I'm okay, Joe. Well, thank you, Lisa. I'm so glad you're here. Steve Wolfbrand said, hi, John B. Lisa says, John, the lawmakers can use the money from the coin to pay the debt down. Joe will explain. That's right, I did. That sounds like a good idea, changing the term. Yeah, well, also in my book on the platinum coin, I also have a short chapter on changing the terms, okay, which originally appeared, okay, in a blog that I posted on the UMKC site. Okay, the name of it is New Economic Perspectives. Okay, I think it's .org as opposed to .com. But you can also find that particular piece on daily costs in my blog, okay, at daily costs. There you have to look for Let's Get It Done, because that was the blogging handle I used, okay, at that point. But I'm sure the post is at, Let's Get It Done also. I'm sorry, is it daily costs also? Lisa says they're hacking their way through everything, and they're still in the Treasury. Robert Reich agrees with me on this. Well, I'm waiting for Nathan to tell us, as he may do tomorrow, or he may do on Monday or this evening, but he's got a lot of inside contacts there at this point, and so I'm sure he'll know whether they're still still at the Treasury Department. But I think they're going to have to be out of the Treasury Department, by Monday morning, unless they're going to dispute the court order, which I don't think they're going to do. I hope they don't, because if they start to dispute the court orders, other than, of course, appealing the court orders, okay, but if they just begin to ignore the court orders, then we're going down a slippery slope, okay, of lawlessness, because if they can avoid court orders, then other people can do that too. People can ignore court orders, okay, in a wholesale fashion. They may then try to enforce the court orders they're not ignoring. In other words, that's always a possibility, but that's going to make the nakedness of the dictatorship absolutely clear. Steve Wolfren says, anyone remember that guy that made millions in Bitcoin but couldn't remember his password? I do remember that. So Lisa says, aha, no, Steve, I missed that one. John B. says, at least a quote, the money to pay off the bond securities has already been deposited at the Fed by the bondholders at initial purchase. Releasing of the sequestered bonds introduces the demand issues. Releasing of the sequestered bonds when you pay the bonds off, of course, there's a demand. But if you don't, pay the bonds off, the bonds can still be used as collateral at banks, okay, and also it is used, okay, in that way. People who hold bonds are, borrowing money against the bonds all the time, using the bonds for collateral. The MMTers have done some calculations on this, and they don't believe that paying off the bonds, would be any more inflationary than issuing the bonds and have them stay inside of the non-government sector as a non-financial asset. Steve works with a platinum coin, work in a vending machine. I have no idea, but of course, people won't have the platinum coin to put in a vending machine. Fry Steve says, going to eat. I'll be back later. Okay, thank you, Fry Steve. So, let's get on with it tonight. We are now, Sandy says, my Facebook went down. Weird. Yeah, that is weird. Okay, anyway, Sandy is back on YouTube, so I'm so glad you're back, Sandy. Okay, let's go to our third piece tonight. I think it's my turn for that piece. So let me present it. It's from the UN's review. Okay, we picked it up there. And, okay, it's by Hua Bin, who's obviously of Chinese extraction. I don't know whether he's, writing from the mainland or from Taiwan or where he's based. But the title of his blog is Truth is on the Sharp End of the Bayonet. The amazing pace of Chinese middle tech innovations. He wrote this on February 7th, 2025, or at least he published it, okay, at the UN's review then. And it's a very good article, full of information. That is, of course, a picture of one of the new Chinese jets. Don't know which one since there's no caption. As China gets ready for a war with the U.S. in the West Pacific, the pace of military innovations has notably picked up. More weapon systems are being declassified, that is, declassified by the Chinese. In the 3 months since I wrote about the many new weapon systems unveiled in the November 2024 Zhuhai Air Show, the biennial premiere on the Chinese military exhibition, even bigger military technology developments have been reported. Many of these new weapons and technologies are potential game changers with long-term implications to the balance of military power between China and the U.S. Here's a summary breakthrough on military tech out of China for the past 3 months. Though hardly exhaustive, it hopefully gives a sense of the rapid pace of progress made in the field. But given the number of technologies to highlight, I will break the article in 2 parts and publish the second part in a few days. So we're only getting the first part right now. So the first category of new tech is 6th-generation fighters, tentatively named the J-36 and J-50. Excuse me a second. China unveiled not one, but 2 prototypes of 6th-generation stealth fighters, making it the first country to roll out the next generation aerial superiority fighters. Though the U.S. has a decade-long head start to develop the 6th-generation fighters, its NGAD program is in limbo due to technical and budgetary issues. On December 26th, the 101st birthday of Chairman Mao, 2 new 6th-gen stealth fighters broke cover in Chengdu and Shenyang, respectively. Both planes feature a revolutionary tailless design, all-angle stealth, unique advanced propulsion systems, avionics, sensor fusion, AI integration, and teaming capability with unmanned systems. While technical details are understandably classified at this point, these fighters clearly feature breakthrough advancement in stealth, also in maneuverability and aerodynamics, featuring pulse detonation engines, fly-by-wire, and thrust vector control technologies. These 6th-gen fighters with expected high supersonic speed, that means Mach 3, are an entirely new class of air combat systems. What is that? 2,500 to 3,500 miles per hour, something like that. Okay. A lot of writings have been done about these that are readily accessible on most of the military-focused online sources. For those interested, I have attached a few links to Miltech websites for further readings. The main takeaway is that China is challenging and leapfrogging the U.S. in a critical Miltech area, which the U.S. Historically has an enormous lead over others. Fighter jet is one of the most sophisticated weapon systems any nation can build. It requires an integration of multiple technical fields from material science, radar, sensor systems, also electronics, propulsion technology, onboard weapon systems, and network communications. Advancements in fighter jet technology have enormous implications. The total cost for the U.S. fifth generation F-35 program by Lockheed is over $1 trillion. The program was envisioned to ensure U.S. air superiority for the next 30 to 50 years. The emergence of the two Chinese sixth generation fighter prototypes have led to widespread doubt about the long-term viability of the F-35 program and led to a 15% Lockheed share collapse immediately after the breaking news. And he leaves the links for reference. In the next area is hypersonic drones. Hypersonic drones, my God. Hypersonic technology is an area where China has built an entrenched global leadership position for a decade already. Started as an assassin's mace, quote unquote, in its anti-access area denial strategy, that's A2AD strategy, against U.S. intervention in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Hypersonic technology has long been developed and matured for Chinese missile arsenals, which feature a range of hypersonic weapons which can target land, sea, and now aerial targets. I have long been interested in this field and attached the two links to recent hypersonic weapons. These are articles that are written by Hua Bin on his website. I think he's a male, but I'm not sure, since I'm not that good on Chinese names. The first article is about a watershed hypersonic technology, and the second article is about MD-19, another Chinese military aerial. I guess that's advanced, should be on there somewhere. Now, pushing beyond arming its missile with hypersonic technology, China is incorporating the technology to its unmanned aircraft programs. China is the only nation to operate hypersonic aircrafts above Mach 5 speed. These include the WZ-8, the WC-9, the MD-19, and the MD-22 family of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs that can operate at near space altitude and conduct deep penetration ISR, strike, and kamikaze missions without fear of interception. In contrast, the fastest plane developed in the U.S. is now the retired Lockheed SR-71 with a max speed of Mach 3. These new hypersonic unmanned drones are distinguished from the traditional manned and unmanned systems in their stealth feature and hypersonic speed. Next category is WZ-9 Divine Eagle. According to a video published on December 28, 2024, the WZ-9, quote, Divine Eagle, unquote, China's large, high-altitude, long-endurance, the HALE, unmanned aerial vehicle, the UAV, designed for anti-stealth missions, was recently spotted in flight. developed by the 601 Institute of Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. The WZ-9 represents a significant step forward in China's efforts to detect and counteract stealth technologies used by advanced military forces worldwide, including the F-35 and the B-21. The WC-9 is a high-altitude, long-endurance UAC with a 20-hour endurance and 18-kilometer near-space flight ceiling. It has a unique twin fuselage design, multi-static radar system, and advanced data fusion capabilities. It features two side-looking conformed radar antenna arrays that integrated along the fuselage, working in conjunction with an ultra-wide dual-band electronically scanned by radar. This enables detection of stealth targets at extended range. The WZ-9 is the first ever anti-stealth drone to detect aircraft such as the F-22, the F-35, and the B-2. It serves as an airborne early warning platform, AEWE. I guess that it should be AEW if it's airborne early warning. And forward deployed thousands of kilometers from Chinese shore to supplement satellite, ground-based radar, and other air defense systems. I know someone who could use the WZ-9. I think it's Iran, of course. Would give them a very good early warning against an Israeli attack. WC-9 is designed to work in groups, controlled via secure data links by either ground-based stations or airborne AWACS positioned, but safely behind the front line. Its multi-static radar system provides a layered and redundant approach to detecting stealth targets, a critical advantage in contested environments. It's the first airborne anti-stealth radar system that works on a global basis. In summary, WC-9 is a critical force multiplier and will pose a serious threat on the stealth technology the U.S. relies on for its air dominance. For further reading, you can check out this article on the Army Recognition site, and he gives a link to that site. Next, GJ-11 Sharp Sword, carrier-based UCAV and Loyal Wingman. The Hangdu GJ-11 is an unmanned combat aerial vehicle, that is to say, a UCAV, designed by the Shenyang Aircraft Design Institute and by Hangdu Aviation Industry. The G-11 features a tailless flying wing with two internal weapons bays. It serves as a loyal wingman for J-20S, the fifth generation fighter from Chengdu. It is likely to serve on China's new drone carrier type 076 amphibious assault ship, to be covered later, making it the first carrier-based hypersonic drone in the world. God, when you read this kind of stuff, it's like, the Chinese appear to be outdistancing us so rapidly, it's just ridiculous. The GJ-11 is a high-stealth, large-size UCAV with 2,000 per kilogram weapons payload that carries, 2,000 kilogram weapons payload. That's 2-ton weapons payload. More than 2 tons, 2.4 tons weapons payload that carries small diameter missiles and precision bombs. It is AI integrated with manned fighters as a force multiplier that's low cost. With the launch of GJ-11, China has begun to materialize the Collaborative Combat Aircraft CCA program the U.S. Air Force is only envisioning. So China is evidently the first mover in this area of air power. Because if Russia had the same thing, he would probably mention it. KJ-3000 Airborne Early Warning and Control, AEWNC aircraft. In December, China officially unveiled a new 55-ton leading-edge AEWNC aircraft, KJ-3000, that is specifically designed to detect stealth fighters and bombers like the F-35 and the B-21. This massive, long-range, early warning and electronic warfare plane is based on the airframe of Y-20, the world's largest military transport plane, and equipped with the latest advanced sensor fusion and radar suite. This represents another layer of Chinese air defense on top of land and space-based assets, as well as unmanned aerial systems such as the WZ-9 and the MD-19, which of course we've already covered. Tama PL-XX hypersonic air-to-air 2A missile. This yet-to-be-named hypersonic A2A missile from the China Airborne Missile Academy, or CAMA, is a revolutionary long-range, ultra-high-speed weapon to achieve aerial superiority. The missile is designed to attack fast-moving aerial targets such as the B-21. It is far more advanced than hypersonic missile technologies used by other nations, which are targeting fixed land-based targets such as Russia's Oreshnik or the U.S. Dark Eagle. Far more advanced than the Oreshnik or the Dark Eagle. God. China pioneered a hypersonic missile designed to attack slow-moving naval targets such as aircraft carriers. The new hypersonic A2A missile is a step function improvement and will revolutionize the dynamics of air superiority contest, as the range of the missile enables pilots to shoot first outside the range of enemy firepower. Typical A2A missile range is less than 500 kilometers, and the above Mach 5 speed will leave target aircraft no time to react and escape. This new missile demonstrates China's quantitative lead over other nations in hypersonic technology. Given the significance of this development, I wrote a piece specifically about this yet-to-be-named missile. Here is a link, and he gives a link to his Substack. I'll continue the discussion about other recent Chinese military technology breakthroughs in another piece, in a few days. Dee, what do you have to say about that? Jesus Christ. On a crutch.
Oh, yes. They are, as you said, extremely advanced.
My God.
And the U.S. just doesn't want to invest in its people, invest, in education and invest the way China is.
Yes, I think that's true. I think those companies, those aircraft companies, okay, are probably government-owned, uh, 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 probably government-owned aircrafts,
Mm-hmm.
which probably accounts for the fact that China is only spending a fraction, of what we're spending on their air power. And obviously, they're able to move a lot faster in terms of development of this stuff, um, uh, because they just don't have to worry about the profits. Now he didn't
Exactly.
say that, but I am making that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody knows better, then let me know. I mean, it could be those are private companies in China. Okay, but I doubt it because I think China, uh, uh, if it contracts out uh, to private companies at all, I'm quite sure those are closely regulated by the government and are not given much opportunity to profit. Okay, anyway, if someone wants to contradict that, I'd be happy to learn the obverse if that is true.
Okay.
So, Steve Wolfman says Elon talked about the future of warfare on the Sean Ryan show, mostly drones, okay, and AI. Yeah, here we're not talking about the future, though. We're talking about uh, new developments in Chinese air power that are already there. That's a big difference. Uh, John B. says okay, the U.S. had better pull its hegemonic head in over the past 40 years. Okay, the U.S. has destroyed its own education industrial base in pursuit of extreme corporate profit slash wealth at the expense of its own citizens. I couldn't agree more. Steve says, I think aircraft carriers are sitting ducks nowadays. I think you can see, based on these Chinese weapons, they're sitting ducks uh, for any conflict that's going to occur, in and around the China Sea. I mean, certainly, uh, those aircrafts are going to be totally sitting ducks for the missiles, we've just read about. Uh, 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 and their aircraft is also going to have an advantage over our aircraft coming off the aircraft carriers, okay, as well. Sandy says, holy crap. Friar Steve says, I am back. If U.S. could bring itself to mind its own domestic business and, stop offensive military political interference in other nations, the world would be a better place. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to wait for China to, sell all the stuff to other rivals, okay, and adversaries of the United States, okay, and then have everybody have the capability, to blow our aircraft out of the water. I mean, we see already that Houthis, who don't have the missile technology of the Chinese, can scare off our carriers. They can damage our carriers to scare them off. I mean, the Houthis haven't sunk one yet, but there's considerable chance they are going to sink one in the near future. Sandy Degg said, this is scary stuff. It is scary stuff. Fortunately, China's not aggressive. It specifically built its war machine for defense against the U.S. And you can see a lot of what it has is for defense against the U.S. and specifically aimed at countering the assets the U.S. Would bring to bear in the South China Sea. So there's that. Okay, Dee, the next one's yours. Okay, I'll present it.
Okay.
It's also a fascinating piece by Alistair Crook.
Oh, good. Here we go. The greatest geopolitical showman's, quote, inside out political solution. Alistair Crook, February 6th.
2025.
Yes, Putin hinted this week that the Ukraine conflict could end in weeks, so Trump may not have a long wait. We'll see. How to do the impossible. America is instinctively an expansionist power, needing new fields to conquer, new financial horizons to master and to exploit. The U.S. is built that way, always was. But if you are Trump, wanting to withdraw from wars on the empire's periphery, yet nonetheless wanting to cast a shiny image of a muscular America, expanding and leading global politics and finance, how to do it? Well, President Trump, even the showman, has a solution. Disdain the now discredited intellectual ideology of muscular American global hegemony, suggests rather that these earlier forever wars should never really have been our wars, and as Alon Mizrahi has advanced and suggested, set about recolonizing that which was already colonized. Canada, Greenland, Panama, and Europe too, of course. Yeah. America, thus, will be bigger. Oh, God. Trump will act with a decisive muscularity, as in Colombia. Make a big show of things, but at the same time shrink the mainstream U.S. security interests to center on the Western Hemisphere. As Trump keeps observing, Americans live in the, quote, Western Hemisphere, not in the Middle East or elsewhere. Trump thus attempts to detach from the American expansionist war periphery, the outside, to proclaim that the inside, the Western Hemisphere, has become bigger and is unquestionably American. And that is what matters. It is a big shift, yet it has the virtue of beginning to be recognized by many Americans as a more accurate reflection of reality. America's instinct remains expansionary. That doesn't change. How many Americans advocate a focus on American domestic needs and its near neighborhood?
So here I have to make a comment, okay, which is increasingly the Latin American countries
Mm-hmm.
are opening up serious trade relationships with China. They're also getting some capital, and that capital will be growing, okay, from BRICS, from the BRICS Bank. Okay, in order to accelerate trade, with the rest of the BRICS nations. We haven't been focusing on these particular developments, okay, in Latin America, except to show anger that it's happening. But it's definitely happening, and the intensity of the trade is getting far more serious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say we Americans do focus our attention, on the Western Hemisphere, refocus our attention, and try to recolonize that which we previously colonized. I can easily foresee a future where China starts to sell some of its advanced weapons uh, to nations of South America, as well as to Mexico, if these countries see a need to better defend themselves against an aggressive United States. So I'm not even sure that focusing, on the Western Hemisphere is going to be so easy for us.
No. And
Recolonizing, the Western Hemisphere. I mean, okay, don't think the Chinese are going to allow that. I don't think, they're going to inject themselves in a military sense. Okay, but I do think they'd probably be willing to sell, their excess weapons.
yes, and also the US, the CIA and all, has to come up with a story to sell to people in the USA.
Yes, they do have to come up with a story. They have to show they continue to be needed. But okay, I think we not only have to refocus on the Western Hemisphere, we have to change our posture to a collaborative posture.
Hmm.
We have to become like the Chinese in doing win-win deals with people.
Exactly.
And we need to start getting that way very, very fast. Because if things go along, they have been, for say another 10 years, okay, or something like that, then we will find that our presence in a good deal of the Western Hemisphere is also minimized.
Right, but we always create a bad guy, and that we're somehow the salvation.
Yes, and I don't think that's going to work anymore. Okay, I think increasingly Latin American countries are going to gravitate towards intense relationships with China. It's really a big market there. They have things, to sell to the Chinese, and the Chinese, would like to collaborate with them. Uh, okay, it's going to happen. Uh, if we want to continue to trade and to benefit from trade with them, we have to become just as win-win collaboration as they are.
Hmm.
And I don't see Trump beginning to do that. He's
No,
not, he's not conceptualizing things in that way. He keeps conceptualizing, the United States as the bully. And he does that, with Latin American nations as well as the nations of West Asia. And he's got to stop,
exactly.
or nowhere in 10 years.
Mizrahi calls this inside out adjustment self cannibalization. Europe is part of the Western Hemisphere of interest. Indeed, Europe regards itself as its progenitor. Yet the Trump team has set about recolonizing it, I bet in a Trump vein. Robert Cooper, a senior British diplomat sent to Brussels, famously in 2002 coined the term liberal imperialism as Europe's new purpose. It was to be imperialism of soft power. Yet still, Cooper couldn't quite let go of European old empire Orientalism, writing, quote, the challenge to the postmodern world is to get used to the idea of double standards. Among ourselves, we operate on the basis of laws and open cooperative security. But when dealing with more old-fashioned kinds of states outside the postmodern continent of Europe, we need to revert to the rougher methods of an earlier era: force, preemptive attack, deception, whatever is necessary to deal with those who still live in the 19th century world of every state for itself. Among ourselves, however, we keep the law, but when we are operating in the jungle, we must also use the law of the jungle.
Well, that's ridiculous.
That is horrid.
Yeah, it is really so far behind the times. I can't believe it.
Cooper's worldview was influential in the thinking of Tony Blair, as well as in the development of European security and defense policy. The EU elite, however, began optimistically to see itself as having top-label real empire status, global clout, based on its regular control of a market of 400 million consumers. It didn't work. The EU had adopted the Obama uh, stratum that promised a mind control framework which assert that reality can be created through managed narrative.
Yeah, I think Obama learned that from the Republican wizard, Karl Rove,
Oh yeah.
who seemed to think, he could create any narrative and dominate with it.
Yeah. Europeans were never properly told that an EU transnational empire implied and required the relinquishment of their sovereign parliamentary decision-making. They imagined rather that they were joining a free trade area. Instead, they were being taken to an EU identity through stealth and the careful management of a confected EU reality. The European liberal empire aspiration in the wake of the Trump culture assaults in Davos looks very passé. The atmospheres hint rather at the passage from one cultural zeitgeist to another. Elon Musk seems to be tasked with tipping Germany and Britain out from the old world view and into the new. This is important for the Trump agenda, as these two states are the primary agitators for war to sustain a global rather than a Western Hemisphere primacy. Europe's decision-making failures over the last years, however, make Europe an obvious target to a president determined on radical cultural change. There is precedent for Trump's inside-out ploy. Old Rome, too, withdrew from its peripheral imperial provinces to concentrate on its core with distant wars drained too many resources at the center, and its army was being outmatched in the field. Rome would never openly admit to the retreat. What takes us back to today's radical inside-out solution, it seems, to consist of go like a demented with whirlwind domestically.
Yes.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Which is what matters most to his base. Aye. And in the and in the international sphere, project confusion and unpredictability. Continue repeating the ancient regime's ideological uh, shibboleths and counterfactual statistics, but then brace up with occasional contrarian throwaway comments, such as saying in reference to the Gaza ceasefire that it is their Israel's war, and that Israel's interests may not always be those of the U.S., and seemingly as it aside that Putin may have already made up his mind not to make a deal on Ukraine.
Well, he's certainly going to make the kind of deal that Trump has been coming forth with. He's never going to agree to that.
No.
He's never going to agree to a frozen conflict in a buffer zone that's policed by Europeans. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, he's won the war. We have to understand that he's won the war, and we have to settle it on that basis. What he wants now is he wants he wants a recognition that he won the war, and he wants a new security framework for Europe. That includes Russia and all the nations of Europe. And if we're smart, we'll negotiate that kind of agreement with him so we can get out of fighting in Europe.
Dissing Putin as a loser in Ukraine perhaps was more addressed to the U.S. Senate and its ongoing confirmation hearings. Trump made these comments days before Tulsi Gabbard faces Senate hearings. Gabbard already is criticized by U.S. hawks for allegedly holding pro-Putin sentiments, as well as being subjected to a media slur campaign by the deep state. Of course, you can't, investigate and discuss something that's not with what they want you to send out to, the media narrative.
Yes,
Good.
if you contradict their media narrative, then you're pro Putin.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Was Trump's apparent disrespect toward Putin and Russia, which caused anger in Russia, said primarily for the cars of U.S. senators. The Senate is home to some of the most ardent never Trumpsters. It's so ridiculous. And where Trump's egregious comments about cleansing Gaza's Palestinians to Egypt or Jordan coordinated with Netanyahu, according to an Israeli minister, intended primarily for the ears of the Israeli right. According to that minister, the issue of encouraging voluntary Palestinian migration is now back on the agenda, just as the right-wing parties have long wanted, and many in Netanyahu's Likud had hoped, music to their ears. Was it then a Trumpian preemptive move designed to save Netanyahu's government from imminent collapse over the ceasefire's second stage and the threat of a walkout by his right-wing contingent? Was Trump's target audience, in this case, then Minister Ben-Gvir and Smotrich?
Our favorite people.
Yep. Trump importantly confuses us by never making it clear to each audience he is addressing his ruminations at any one time. Is there, is there nonetheless some substance sediment within Trump's comment that any Palestinian state must be resolved in some other way than the two-state formula? Maybe we should not discount Trump's strong leanings towards Israel. Netanyahu faces harsh criticism for mishandling both the Gaza and Lebanese ceasefire. He has been guilty of promising one thing to one party and the opposite to the other, an old vice. He has promised the right a return to the war in Gaza, yet committed to the unequivocal end of the war and the actual ceasefire agreement. In Lebanon, Israel was committed to withdraw by 26 January on the one hand, yet its military is still there, provoking a human wave of Lebanese returning to the south, hoping to reclaim their homes. Consequently, Netanyahu at this juncture is utterly dependent on Trump. The Prime Minister's wiles will not be enough to get him off the hooks. Trump has him where he wants him. Trump will get ceasefires and will tell Netanyahu no attack on Iran, at least until Trump has explored the possibility of a deal with Tehran. I've gone up too far. With Putin and with Russia, the opposite is the case. Trump there has no leverage. The favorite word in Washington. He has no leverage for four reasons.
Oops,
First,
sorry. There we go.
here we go. Okay. Firstly, since Russia steadfastly refuses the idea of any compromise, that, quote, boils down to freezing the conflict along the lines of engagement that will give time to the U.S. and NATO's rearm the remnants of the Ukrainian army and then start a new round of hostilities. Second, because Moscow's conditions for ending the war will prove to be unacceptable to Washington, as they would not be susceptible to being presented as an American win. Thirdly, because Russia holds the clear military advantage, Ukraine is about to lose this war. Major Ukrainian strongholds are now being taken by Russian forces without resistance. This ultimately will lead to a cascade effect. Ukraine may cease to exist if serious negotiations do not take place before summer. The head of the Ukrainian military intelligence, Kryl, Budanov, recently warned. But fourthly, because history is not reflected at all in the word leverage, when peoples who occupy the same geography have different and often irreconcilable versions of history, the Western transactional split the power spectrum simply doesn't work. The opposed side will not be moved unless some resolution recognizes and takes account of their history. The US needs to always the US needs to always to win. So does Trump understand that the eludible dynamics of this war. Oops, you're too high up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went too fast.
Yes. Okay. Dynamics of this war militate against presenting any transactional outcome as a clear win for the U.S. Of course, he does, or will do, when professionally briefed by his team. The logic of the Ukraine side situation, to be blunt, suggests that President Putin should quietly advise President Trump to walk away from the Ukraine conflict to avoid taking ownership of a Western debacle. Putin hinted this week that the Ukraine conflict could end in weeks, so Trump may not have a long wait. Should Trump want to win, high likely, Trump, then he should be steered by Putin's many hints. Intermediate missile deployments by both parties are creating heightened risk and cry out for a new limitation agreement. Trump could say that he saved us all from World War III, and there could be more than a grain of truth in it.
Yes, I certainly agree with that. And I think that these last three, three paragraphs should offer some hints, okay, to China. I'm sorry, uh, to Trump, okay, specifically because uh, this isn't Trump's war. It was Biden's war from the start. But he has been gradually taking ownership of this war, and politically, that is not good for him. Okay, when he tries to propose uh, some solution that is, obviously unacceptable to Putin, okay, he's making a move to own the stalemate that Joe Biden, is trying to create. If he recognizes the facts on the ground, Okay, and he doesn't really do anything about them. He just starts to negotiate with Putin on how the risks of World War III can be reduced. And he develops a new security framework which limits the IRBM threat from both sides. He could well claim that he saved us all, from World War III. I personally would accept that. I would think he would have saved us from World War III, at least from the Ukraine war developing into World War III. And I'd be happy about that. I'd be happy to give Trump credit for it if he made such an agreement. Okay, but of course, after he does that, he has to pivot over to the Middle East, or to West Asia, I should say, and to make an agreement, in West Asia that also saves us from the possibility of World War III. Because things are, getting pretty hot there. And as long as there's a possibility that the Israelis could unleash a nuclear war in that area, there is the possibility of escalation to World War III. So he has to save us from World War III twice in both of those areas. And then he has to save us from the possibility of World War III through starting something in the South China Sea, as well. He has to face the fact that the safest things he can do now is to refocus towards the Western Hemisphere. It's really too dangerous to do anything else. So, anyway, I thought this article was a very good one from my point of view.
I think so too. And he has to, I know Israel's not going to like it, but, Trump, if he doesn't want to be considered another war criminal, he's got to go along with the Palestinian state.
Yes, I think he's going to have to go along with the Palestinian state. And I think Trump could force the Israelis to go with the Palestinian state. And if Trump wants peace in West Asia, then he's going to have to do that. Also, by the way, even though we haven't, really covered it here much of late, there's been continuous progress on the Iranians' part in terms, of innovating, some very capable new weapons. And the Chinese aren't the only ones, who've been doing that. And I think if things develop in a couple of months, so that the Israelis are thinking of attacking Iran again, I think the Iranians are going to beat them to the punch, and it's going to be devastating for Israel. At that point, I think Trump could be a hero, simply by saving Israel, by negotiating a peace.
Right, because now the region, Israel's on the losing end where the region is concerned.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So we got some comments.
Okay.
Steve Wolfbrand says, what did he say? China also rapidly moving forward on space travel and exploration. Absolutely. They're exploring the dark side of the moon. Really, they're doing outstanding things in their space program now. And we're falling behind in that program also. So John B. says, it's gross stupidity and hubris from ignorant ruling elites who apparently live in an unreal fantasy land of divinely endowed supremacy. Our challenge is to survive despite our uh, um, foolish leaders, and I couldn't agree more with with that. Despite our foolish leaders, we need to survive. Okay, and that's going to be tough
Oh, definitely.
because they've been trying to disempower us all, and they're going down that path, so no one can. And that stupidity is going to uh, uh, to destroy us all because they're nowhere near sensible when it comes to international relations. Okay, even Sandy says, true, D. And Evelina says, even now, Argentina's biggest trading partner after Brazil is China. That's true. Even now, yes. Marcy says, Doc, the CCP has little say in our foreign policy. U.S. interest remains focused on ASEAN military exercises. Okay. And who's the main trading partner of the ASEAN nations today? I mean, who's their biggest trading partner? Each one of them. It's China. Protecting Taiwan, a chips manufacturer, as well as strong NATO partnerships, uh, uh, Finland and Sweden. Hey, Friar Steve, what's the total population of both of those nations? Is it maybe 20 million between the two of them? Finland and Sweden and NATO was in response to Russian aggression, nothing else. No, it was in response to their own stupidity. There was no Russian aggression against them, and there was no threat of Russian aggression against them. There was no thought of it, and Russia wasn't even interested. God. Friar Steve, not true. 2 USA, 3 Germany. What's 2 USA, 3 Germany? What's 2 USA, 3 Germany? If we're talking about, if we're talking about, the largest economies, yes, number 2 is US. China's number 1. I believe number 3 is India. And number 4 is Russia. And we don't get to Germany until we get to number 5. If you measure it in PPP. Evelina Pont says, who was it that said something to the effect that fooling some of the people some of the time, but unable to fool all the people all the time? It was Abraham Lincoln. Narratives wear off eventually, even when you manage for a time. Famously, it was Abraham Lincoln. Friar Steve says, we will never let Putin be our partner. Both Putin and Bibi both have national warrants. Only one you notice is Bibi's. That's a double standard. I notice, and we've covered on my program, the warrant against Putin. And I'm telling you, Friar Steve, that warrant is bullshit. It is bullshit. There is nothing to it. It was manufactured by the Western powers. The interesting thing is now that the ICC is indicting people we like, we're sanctioning ICC members. And we're discrediting what they do. But when they put a warrant out against Putin, then there was applause for the ICC. Come on, there's no objectivity here at all. John B. says, Europeans were never properly told. I recall Moslem, Mitchell, Ray, Hudson, and more explaining to European citizens the dysfunctional, unfederated architecture of the Euro scheme. Excuse me. Absolutely true. But you have to remember that the audience of Moslem, Mitchell, and Ray, Hudson, okay, and Kelton, okay, and all the MMTers was smaller than a spit in the ocean. There were no economists recognized as major economists outside of, maybe Jamie Galbraith, who were warning the Europeans about their scheme. I mean, most of them just bought, the Euro propaganda about how wonderful it was going to be. There were very few who weren't against it. And those who did were not people who were very popular in economics. Alistair, as well as the Europeans, weren't listening. Bill Mitchell wrote a book on it. He did write a book on it. The Europeans weren't listening to the MMTers or to MMT-related people. ICC warrants for both Bibi and Putin, yes. But, I've seen both warrants, and I know the Putin warrant is bullshit, and I know the Bibi warrant is justified. Farage says Trump will be making no deals with Iran. I don't think he'll be making deals with Iran because he won't be able to accept the fact that in their region they're powerful, very powerful, and he won't be able to accept that. Evelina says, U.S. and Argentina are both big exporters of soy, wheat, and cows, traditionally competing rather than collaborating. Germany isn't exporting much at the moment. Yeah, they need cheap oil to do exporting. Trump making a deal, with Ukraine, for minerals. For Steve, I'm afraid most of the mineral wealth is in the area currently controlled by the Russians that is in the process of getting annexed, by Russia. In other words, 4 of the oblasts, of course, have been officially annexed by Russia. But going further to the next 4 oblasts, which are about to fall to the Russians, and about to be annexed by the Russians. After that, the rump state, which continues to exist, will be strong in agriculture, and that's it. It's not going to be strong in any other area. No mineral wealth at all. There's no mineral wealth in that geography. That's still going to be surviving, is Ukraine. So if you think there's going to be a deal with Ukraine for minerals, you're incorrect. Any deal for minerals will have to be made by Russia. Trump's going to have to deal with Russia, for minerals. John B., and they're still not listening, perhaps enduring ongoing poverty, will focus their attention on the imposition of structurally destructive economic issues and their surrender of national sovereignty. Perhaps. I think German foreign policy is going to change very soon. I think they're going to throw out the mainstream parties and relegate them to minority status for a while. And then relations with Russia will be reestablished. And cheap oil and gas will again flow from Russia to Europe. Fire Steve says it's Putin's war, no one else's. No. I'm afraid it's America's war as well. Since 2008, we were trying to build up for a proxy war with Russia. That's what the coup in 2014 was all about. That's what the oppression of the Russians, eastern part of Ukraine, was all about. That's what the rearming of Ukraine was all about. That's what building up an armed force of 600,000 people in Ukraine, well armed and well trained by NATO forces, was all about. Sandy Degg leaves an icon, which I cannot read from this interface. Friar Steve, no World War III, China won't save Putin. China doesn't have to save Putin. We have no defense against the hypersonic missiles. And we don't have any of our own hypersonic missiles right now. Friar Steve says World War III is just nonsense, fear-mongering. Trump wants his name on a casino in Gaza. I don't think he cares what Iran has to say. Well, he should care, because Iran has the capability to destroy all of Israel without resorting to nuclear weapons. Friar Steve says Trump does not actually negotiate. He only makes threats. No, he negotiates also. He makes threats at the beginning because he thinks that's cool. And then he settles down to bargaining. I mean, he did that with the trade deals in the first of the Trump administrations. He negotiated a better trade deal than we had with Canada, and Mexico. He did that. He started off with bold statements, and then he had, a good person in there, to negotiate the trade agreements. Feisty says, didn't China claim ownership of the moon? I don't know. I'm not aware of that, but maybe their claim of ownership of the moon is still to come. If they colonize the dark side before we get to that, they might certainly have half of it. Frosty says, Doc, their size doesn't matter. It's a guarantee of protection, all NATO. No, their size does matter because they can contribute only small armed forces to NATO. So they are very vulnerable attack. They are very vulnerable to attack, from Russia. And whether you like it or not, Friar Steve, in the aftermath of the Ukraine war, there's going to be considerable stress, on NATO. Some nations are likely to leave, and NATO is likely to break up. All right, Steve, I was responding to Evelina trading with Argentina. Both Putin and Bibi committed war crimes. Both. No, Putin did not commit any war crimes. The war crimes inside of Ukraine were committed by the Ukrainians. Absolutely, in the long run, you will see that I am correct. Evelina says, Friar Steve, the U.S. and Argentina are both big exporters of wheat, soy, and meat. They don't trade with each other. And that's the reason Putin wants to steal eastern Ukraine. Let's see what Trump decides. Yes, let's see what Trump, without any hypersonic missiles and with an army of only 449,000 people spreads all over the world. Let's see what Trump decides. Steve Wolfbrand says, that Ukraine is corrupt. AF. I don't know what AF means. ADF and Putin. Is that what we're rooting for, Doc? Friar Steve, I'm not rooting for anybody except for America. Okay, I want the United States to do what is good for the United States. And I root for the United States to do that, which means that I root for the United States to at last recognize the reality of the world and adapt to it. That's not what the United States is doing. Coup, laugh out loud, that's Putin version. No, it is not Putin's version. There was a duly elected government there. International authorities claimed that the election that put in that government was clean. That government was overthrown, okay, by a color revolution that was a coup d'etat supported by the United States, using the muscle of the right sector and the neo-Nazis to take over the government.
Exactly. We lived through it.
That's false. Little green men weren't trained by NATO. The Ukrainian army was trained by NATO. There was training of Ukrainian people inside of NATO countries. Trump broke his own trade deal. Which trade deal are you talking about? He recently did break his trade deal. That's right. When the exchange rate of the euro heads south, big time Europe will change. I suspect it will be soon, as lack of cheap energy destroys, okay, industrial output. Yeah, okay. I think the euro is just about worth what the dollar is right now. At one point, the euro had gone up to 150 or 160, against the dollar. Okay, now I think it's close to 1-1. Okay, 1-1. Frosty says, laugh out loud. No, Doc, not just like BTC, Doc, you're getting it wrong. By the way, 0.1 BTC is all you need for general wealth. I don't understand what you're saying there, Friar Steve, I'm afraid. Laugh out loud. You root against U.S. interests. No, I don't. I root for the U.S. interest. You just have a conception of U.S. interest which is in accord with the people who've been running the United States, and I have a conception of U.S. interest which is entirely different. Okay, D has gone for some reason. I do not know why. Friar Steve says, show proof. Show proof. We can debate this anytime. Just have more proof than a hacked phone call. Little Green Man Wagner Group. The coup was in Crimea. Yeah, there was a coup in Crimea, or an absorption of Crimea, in response to the coup in Ukraine. The coup in Ukraine came first. Then Russia took over Crimea. Heidi. Friar Steve says, financial analysts, including Rajat Soni, believe that 0.1 Bitcoin, you mean 10-cent Bitcoin? I mean, what are you talking about? Could position individuals and their families for generational wealth, especially with the potential for Bitcoin to reach values of 1 million. Oh, I see. You mean $100,000 for each family if they were given a Bitcoin. 5 million or even 13 million in the future 4 days. Okay. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I know that if Bitcoin reaches very high values, then when you say, okay, let's say that Bitcoin reached $1 million, okay, in value. So then you're saying 0.1 Bitcoin could position individuals and their families, okay, for generational wealth. Okay, what you're saying is that $100,000 is going to be enough, okay, for generational wealth. That's not true. Bitcoin is not going to keep going up, okay, unless the rich and the government continue to goose the demand. We can show evidence of the Russian involvement. Please show evidence of any other involvement, okay, from the West. Friar Steve, I've done lots and lots of streams. And in these streams, I've pointed to evidence. Okay, I'm a streamer. I have very little time and no incentive to show you evidence because I don't have to prove myself, okay, to my audience or my evidence, okay, to my audience. You are a recent arrival and you don't know anything about these early streams. I mean, we've been covering the Ukraine war here since the start. And we are well aware of the run-up, okay, to it. And my account of how the Ukraine war started and my analysis of it is completely consistent with that of all kinds of other people who are very expert in the field of international relations. I myself am a PhD in comparative politics, okay, in international relations. I know the history of these things, and I'm very sophisticated when it comes to the theory, okay, of international relations. Thank you. So I'm not going to have a discussion of evidence with you here because, frankly, you are not important enough to have that discussion with. If you want to bring forth some idiot from the establishment, you know, to debate me, where he and I can bring hundreds of people to this stream, I will be glad to debate him and show evidence. But I don't gain a thing from debating you. Have I made myself clear? I hope I have. I know who Timothy Snyder is. He's an idiot. Okay. I'm going to move on to the final thing. I know Timothy Snyder. He's full of shit. Do you know who Jeffrey Sachs is? Okay. Do you know who John Mearsheimer is? How about Colonel Wilkerson? Okay. Do you know who he is? Who cares about what Tim Snyder thinks?
I know, we were covering this from the early days and the run up to it.
Yeah. Also, Tim Snyder is an ideologist about totalitarianism. He's not that good when it comes to the theory of totalitarianism. Okay, by the way, I did my PhD thesis on that. And he certainly doesn't know that much about the specifics of the Ukraine conflict. Okay, I am now shifting now to the final piece of the evening. It's from Pepe Escobar, and it's called In Valdai, Confronting the American Problem, quote unquote, in West Asia. So I am moving to that now. Friar Steve says, Doc, I've been following you since late 2021. Well, then you can quote the evidence from all my streams on this particular topic, Friar Steve. I don't know whether Jeffrey Sachs has ever been on RT. What's the difference if they're on RT? You still have to confront what they have to say. I don't know if John Mearsheimer has been on RT. But John Mearsheimer is a university professor at the University of Chicago, and Jeff Sachs is a university professor at Columbia. Both of them are more highly thought of in international relations than Timothy Snyder, who's just an anti-Russian, anti-China propagandist. I mean, that's what he is. Anyway. Okay. In Valdai, Confronting the American Problem in West Asia. Let us go to that. It is the final piece. Here is a graphic of Trump in the foreground and Netanyahu and Putin and Xi in the background with a bunch of destroyed buildings and a bunch of oil. Moscow, the 14th Middle East Conference of the Valdai Club in Moscow, was hit by a geopolitical bunker buster bomb right in the middle of the proceedings. The announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump himself of some sort of future Trump Gaza Riviera resort and casino in Palestine. Even before international outrage started to overspill from the BRICS fronts to ASEAN to the Arab world, which sees it as Nakba 2.0, reaching even Trump-friendly Saudi Arabia and major U.S. allies in Europe, perplexity set in at Valdai among most scholars and academics. Two glaring exceptions were professor at the University of Tehran, specifically Mohammed Marandi and former British diplomat Alistair Crook, always delicately nuanced analysts of West Asia. Both have long argued that as the U.S. empire is being forced to retreat, it will become much more ruthless and take greater risks. Professor Marandi qualifies Trump as, quote, a gift, unquote, to American global decline. Crook, for his part, wonders whether Israel's far-right Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu really trapped Crunk in a quagmire, when it may be the other way around. Trump seems to have Netanyahu, which he basically despises, exactly where he wants him, owing favors. Trump made a lot of bombastic promises, which Netanyahu can sell as a major success to the Tel Aviv warmongers who compose his government, so his coalition will hold for now. Yet in return, Israel will still have to follow the next step of the despised ceasefire project. That would lead, in theory, to the end of the war. Netanyahu wants an infinite war with unlimited Eretz Israel expansion and annexation. That is not a done deal by far. As it stands, at face value, one fell swoop, Trump normalized genocide, ethnic cleansing, and the reduction of the Gaza tragedy to a tawdry real estate deal in a, quote, phenomenal location, unquote. The accumulated effect of, quote, the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, unquote. Quote, we will own it, unquote, and, quote, level the site, unquote, not only opens the U.S. to a shockingly illegal foreign annexation, but it's the embarrassingly passe, quote, there are no Palestinians, unquote, trope on steroids. But this is far from, quote, sheer lunacy, unquote, as defined by U.S. think tanks everywhere. It's a natural extension of trying to buy Greenland, trying to annex Canada, in both cases an increase to the resource base of the U.S., grabbing the Panama Canal and rechristening the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. It's about changing the subject and the predominant story instead of addressing the real threat to the empire, the Russia-China strategic partnership. Here I would add the Russia-China-Iran strategic partnership. In this case, the new Gaza Riviera, built on a pyramid of skulls, is not only endorsed, by the way, the Mongols were famous for pyramids of skulls, is not only endorsed but already envisioned by the genocidals in Tel Aviv in tandem with Trump's billionaire donors, the key part of Israel's lobby in the U.S. Trump's vision, according to New York insiders, came from his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who less than a year ago was already talking about the real estate gold represented by the Gaza seashore. Kushner is even more dangerous now that he's acting behind the curtains in Trump's second term. He's the main influencer on POTUS when it comes to a possible future U.S. sanctioned occupation of Gaza. For the moment, we have a deport building, selling reality show ethos applied to the most insoluble problem in West Asia. Professor Morandi calls it the quote, the U.S.-Israel problem, unquote. Betaha Ajan at the Ankara Institute qualifies it as, quote, the Israeli-centered order, unquote, as well as, quote, the American problem, unquote. Living under a, quote, global regime change. The discussions at Valdai, of course, extrapolated Trump's Gaza bombshell. Ojan focused on the, quote, immense stress test, unquote, on West Asia, from the genocide in Gaza to, quote, Assad must go, unquote, basically metastasizing into Al-Qaeda in suits ruling Damascus. He warns that the current global chaos may spawn new wars. We are now in a protest of, quote, a process of global regime change, unquote, where, quote, sustainable instability is over, unquote. The Palestinian presence via PLO Minister of Social Development, Ahmad Majdalani, was not exactly heartening. He drummed up the usual talking points, such as the problem of, quote, normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel with the backdrop of annexation of the West Bank, unquote, while, quote, other Muslim nations only watch from the sidelines, unquote. What he also wondered is whether, quote, BRICS will be able to work as an effective counterbalance, unquote, to, quote, the American problem, unquote, as defined by Ojan. But on the tortuous issue of Palestinian unity, he offered nothing new and went on carping about the impossibility of, quote, the Abraham Accords without the Palestinian people, unquote. The eminent Vitaly Naumkin, president of the Institute of Oriental Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences, published an excellent report on Syria, co-authored with Vasily Kuznetsov, also from the Institute of Oriental Studies. Now, I stress that the fall of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad represents a, quote, window of opportunity, unquote, for Israel, Turkey, and the the monarchies of the Gulf. They qualify the nuances. Who is Israel really up to? What is Israel really up to? Quote, establishing direct control over certain which exactly territories or creating a wide buffer zone, unquote. On Turkey, quote, Ankar's interest in inflicting a strategic defeat on the Kurds and possibly creating a buffer zone along the Syrian-Turkish border is understandable. What is unclear is, quote, the extent of the American commitment to investing in the Kurds, unquote, under Trump. Okay, on the monarchies of the Gulf, quote, they will strengthen their position primarily using economic leverage, unquote, yet, quote, the interests of various GCC countries vary and their alignment is not always clear, unquote. As for Iran, Namkin and Kuznetsov realistically point out if the formerly extremist new Syrian setup fails to consolidate a society, quote unquote, and that's a very strong possibility, quote, Iran may have another shot at restoring its influence, unquote. For Namkin, the Russian bases in Syria, quote, should stay, unquote, a topic that is incidentally a source of fierce debate in Moscow's corridors of power. He argues this position mostly because Russia, quote, could balance the expansionist designs of some Turkey factions in northern Syria, unquote. Corridor mania, even though the recently signed Russia-Iran strategic partnership was not specifically discussed at Valdai, Professor Morandi noted that, quote, Iran is moving very fast on what needs to be built because that will draw India much closer economically, unquote. The heart of the matter of the Russia-Iran deal is not actually military, it's geoeconomic and centered on the international north-south transportation corridor, the INSDC, a key Eurasia BRICS integration connectivity project. The INSDC is a de facto accelerator of trade between top BRICS members, Russia, Iran, and India, bound to increase settlements in their own currencies. That's exactly that led Trump erroneously to, quote, accuse, unquote, BRICS of trying to come up with their own currency. Russia and Iran, both heavily sanctioned, already trade heavily in rubles, and reals. On the wider geoeconomic front, arguably the most stimulating contribution at Valdai was offered by Elchin Hajanov, the director of the Baku International Policy and Security Network. The breath of fresh air from the South Caucasus stood in sharp contrast with the gloomy geopolitical hurricanes threatening West Asia. Aghajanov emphasized Azeri sovereignty against hegemony, all the while acknowledging the, quote, geostrategic aspirations of the West, unquote. He described Azerbaijan as a, quote, crossroads of transportation corridors, unquote. At least 13 corridors, which led him to coin this beauty, the corridor mania, the italics mine, says Pepe. Across history, the South Caucasus has always been a key geoeconomic hub of Eurasia. Corridor mania encompasses every project from Trasica to the Chinese Middle Corridor, the Trans-Caspian, and the INSTC, not to mention the hyper-controversial Zangezur Corridor, supported by the West, which would run across 40 kilometers of Armenian territory on the border of Iran. Zangezur would be linked to branches of the new Silk Roads from Xinjiang and Central Asia to Turkey, and also connected to the Trans-Caspian. Akhajinov was adamant, but was adamant that with Zangezur, Azerbaijan has no intention whatsoever to annex Armenian lands. Baku also wants its operation to go to Iran via an Iran-Armenia link. The Tehran's position is that as long as there's no annexation, in this case, the better option would be underground. The corridor should go ahead. Akhajinov did refer to the Azerbaijan-Iran link across the Aras River. Quote, the late Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi was a strong supporter, unquote. Akhajinov also emphasized that as much as Azerbaijan is a, quote, natural ally of Turkey and Pakistan, unquote, the same should apply to Iran, where at least 13 million ethnic Azeris live. I didn't realize that was the case. If that's true, if you add, the 13 million ethnic Azeris to, I think they got to be at least 10,000 Kurds, in Iran. That means at least 23 million of the 95 million population of Iran, is not Iranian, culturally speaking. Just an observation. He defines Russia as a, quote, natural strategic partner, unquote. He also praised the corridor way up north, the Northern Sea Route, quote, the shortest way from New York to China is via Murmansk, and the shortest way from Brazil to China is via St. Petersburg, unquote. As the dogs of war keep barking, corridor mania keeps on rolling. But first, West Asia really needs to bury the ridiculous Trumpian vision of a Gaza Riviera. I certainly agree with the conclusion to that article. And much else in it, of course, is very fascinating, since you do have the corridor mania going on all over the place. Really very interesting. But I think the Gaza Riviera is dead on arrival, and that Trump will probably be withdrawing from it in just a few days, because I don't think he has the military power to enforce it. I really don't. I think if we try to put our forces there, if the United States try to put our forces there, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi resistance, and the Iranian resistance, will simply devastate the area, and our armed forces in that area, they'll be sitting ducks, and I don't think there's anything they can do about it. And by the way, the power of our aircraft carriers in that region is going to be nil, because they're sitting ducks for the hypersonic missiles. And if China ever starts to sell, any of its hypersonic missiles to Iran, then look out. Just absolutely look out. Oh, God. Anyway, Dee, you got anything on that? I'm not sure Dee is still here. I got to look, see. Yeah, she is.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, you want to add anything to that piece?
No.
Okay, did you like that piece?
Yes, I like the piece. I was interrupted a bit, but
Oh, okay.
yes. Yeah, I'm just so disgusted with things, and just with Trump, A lot of this is loudmouth stuff too.
I know. Quite a lot of it is loudmouth stuff. Quite a lot of it is, simply testing the waters. Probably Kushner brought the idea to Trump,
Hmm.
and Trump probably, okay, I'll float it, and he's floating it, and then he's getting all the negatives, from all the various areas. What I fear is this: that with Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense, he won't get the truth concerning the correlation of forces in West Asia.
No.
That he may get a biased view that we are much stronger, than we are. That's one reason why I think the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard could be so important, because she will tell him the truth about the correlation of forces in that area. Now, when she says something different from Hegseth, I'm not sure how Trump is going to take, the differences in their views, and views that likely will be expressed by Sebastian Gorka, and little Marco.
And these views where Gaza is concerned, was a plan that even if, say, Harris won, just wiping out Gaza was on the plan. The gas fields that are out there, and there was a confidence by the settlement movement that they were going to be building, Jewish settlements in Gaza. We had previously seen advertisements here in the USA about settlements in Gaza, coming settlements. So it was something that was on the agenda, and they try to do things in a quiet way a lot of times, and saying, "Oh, Daniela Weiss and her crew and all these people, oh, they're just fringed or this or that, the other thing." But there's a way of they sneak things in. They do it in a way. They have their way of doing things where Trump just spews it out and says it. This is what was on the agenda. Maybe not not a Trumpian land over there, but the fact of having Jewish settlements and elites along the water and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's just crazy. It assumes the defeat of Iran and the axis of resistance by the United States, by the combination of the United States and Israel. And I just don't think that is possible anymore. I think Iran is too strong. I think Hezbollah is too strong. I think the Houthis are too strong.
Right. And Iran already, I had talked about this on my show last night. I had extra time and I went over some things. And this one article with Iran, with the Ayatollah Khomeini, had said that there's no sense in making deals with the U.S. because the U.S. doesn't keep the deals.
Yes, I also heard that position. Okay, I noticed it on YouTube today. Okay, I entirely agree. If the Iranians are going to have a deal with the United States, it has to be a self-enforcing deal. Okay, I think that Trump is going to feel them out in terms of their willingness to talk, and they will say they are willing to talk, but they're going to drive a very hard bargain, because after all, it was Trump who got out of the JCPOA. So from their point of view, Trump cannot be trusted. So it's going to be hard for him, to negotiate a deal with them, and he's going to have to give away a lot, and he's not going to be in a position to do a deal with them that will be favorable to the right wing in Israel. The only thing he's going to be in a position to do is to do a deal with them, which involves a two-state solution for the Palestinians. And he's not going to be able to square this with his donor profile. If he does this, they're just going to ditch him. But that's what he has to do if he wants peace in the area.
And he can't run for re-election again anyway, so.
So, I just think it's going to be very difficult for him. And okay, as far as Gaza Riviera is concerned, he can forget that unless he's willing to get Israel to get out of the West Bank, okay, and to trade some of the more fertile land in Israel in return for Gaza. And I don't think he'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, and we were talking about the, remember the ICC when they had said but I don't know what word I should use, but anyway, it was said that, Israel had to get out of Gaza, they had to get out of the West Bank, and they said there has to be a two-state solution, that, the occupation needs to be over, and they gave a timeline, but none of that is, is holding anything.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Nothing, that's not holding anything. Okay, but I think the bottom line is, I don't think the U.S. has the military capability to enforce its will in West Asia if that will is opposed to what Iran wants and what Turkey wants and what the Russians want.
And there can be no normalization
There can be
unless
normalization until there's a Palestinian state. I think that's the only way to get peace, in the Middle East. And I think it's very important, they negotiate that now, because in 10 years from now, the only choice will be to have a Palestinian state from the river to the sea in Israel, because the Israeli state won't continue to exist, at that time. It will be too weak to maintain itself. Farsteed says we need to invest in Kurds, not Israel. Investing in Kurds means conflict with Iran. It means conflict with Iran, conflict with Turkey, conflict with Iraq. It would mean conflict with Syria as well if Syria was still a unitary state. Of course, it's not. Okay, but it involves fighting, with too many nations. What do you propose we invest in Kurdistan for? Is it to try to build up a military, so we can fight a proxy war, against Iran? I mean, what's your objective? The Iranians and the Turks are not going to allow a significant degree of militarization of the Kurds. I mean, they're both going to attack Kurdistan and simply crush the Kurds. They're not going to allow that to happen. Sandy Degg says, bye, John, because John B's leaving. We need to transfer manufacturing from China to India. No, Friar Steve, we need to transfer manufacturing back to the United States. Evelina says, saw the new HTS map of Syria, Golan Heights, Golan Heights and Alexandretta were missing. Apparently, it's handing them over. Oh, you mean to Israel? Yeah. Oh, to Israel. Okay, in Turkey. Please all remember to hit the like button, Lana Del says. Thank you, Lana. Friar Steve says, Eve Watt, Doc, you just said Trump will withdraw his plan in a few days. I think you're not even close, Doc, but we will see. Yeah, we will see. If a Chinese hypersonic missile hits a U asset, there will be problems. Nothing could empower the Trump administration more. I don't think a Chinese hypersonic missile is going to be directed at Australia. If there's a conflict in the South China Sea, their hypersonic missiles are going to be directed at our carriers, and the hypersonic missiles are going to be directed at Taiwan assets, that they want to get rid of. And if you say nothing could empower the Trump administration more, empower the Trump administration to do what? To do exactly what? 449,000 people in the Army and 120,000 in the Marines, and probably among all the services about 1.2 million people. I mean, that's not enough to do anything unless we totally withdraw from the rest of the world and just focus on that. Why would he say he's taking ownership of Gaza, did not do it? He was floating a balloon to see what would happen. ASEAN is solid. We're doing a training exercise with them. Okay, I think ASEAN is with China. Okay, I think Pepe thinks so too. Friar Steve says Tulsi is trash. She's only information to the Russians. Her only desire is to both classify operations she deems illegal. Tulsi will not be trusted by the intelligence services. Well, that last I agree with. She won't be trusted by the intelligence services. But the issue is whether she's going to be trusted by Trump or not, and whether she can get information from the intelligence services. The idea that Tulsi's a Russian spy, though, is ridiculous. Okay, or a Russian asset. Frosty said, when the U.S. killed Saddam, they lost their only chance to keep Iran in check. And Hezbollah is extremely weak, Doc. Well, there again, we disagree, Friar Steve. I think Hezbollah is very strong, and that if there's a renewed conflict in the area, they will demonstrate that. Lisa Theobald says, I'm with you, dear D. And D says, I'm assuming a new map will go in school textbooks. Terrible for kids living in confusing times. Friar Steve said they had Vance next to push the MAGA agenda. I'm not worried about J.D. Vance. Okay, it is the first name of Adelson is Miriam or Mariam in Hebrew. Okay, she's not a Marianne. She's a Mariam or a Miriam. Gave up $100 million to turn the West Bank over to Israel. Well, okay, I guess that she's going to lose $100 million because before the West Bank gets turned over to Israel, I think the Iranians are going to drive all the Israeli settlers out of the West Bank with hypersonic missiles. That's why Huckabee is a new ambassador.
Well, I guess the old saying, you win some, you lose some.
There's another old saying. How many soldiers, does Huckabee have to put boots on the ground in the West Bank? Can the United States even afford to put 40,000 troops into the West Bank? That's not enough to take it.
No.
Farsi says there will never be a two-state solution under Trump. Fine. Well, I shouldn't say fine. I don't think it's fine. What I will say is there had better be a two-state solution under Trump, or there won't be any peace, and eventually there will be no Israel. Farsi says 20 days into the MAGA agenda, a long way to go. Yeah, it is a long way to go. And there's a lot of resistance, which has begun to emerge now in the form of lawsuits. We see how far that takes people. But if it doesn't take people far enough, then people will organize in other ways. They'll organize at the state level. The governors are going to resist. It's going to be a long route for Trump. Okay, in a conflict, Iraq would have the most to gain, maybe. In the United States of Kurdistan, we would have permanent troops presence and all the oil we can ever ask for. It would provide stability. It's not, because Turkey and Iran are going to react to our arming, of Kurdistan, and our sending of troops in with war. That manufacturing cannot come back to the United States. We cannot do labor $2 an hour here. Sure we can. I mean, look, Toyota has manufacturing here, and it's paying people a decent wage. Subaru is manufacturing here, and they pay people a decent wage. We can have manufacturing here and pay people a decent wage also. All that has to happen is cutting back the profits a little. Doc, we do not go to war alone. The more we do ridiculous things, like sending people into Kurdistan and arming Kurdistan, the more we will go to war alone. You will see the European regimes over the next 5 years are all going to turn towards the independence of Europe and the independence of their own states, and they will not join us in these adventures. Check for yourself, Doc. Let's see who does more training, China or us, with ASEAN. Training, schmaining. Who is going to do more trade with ASEAN, China or us? Evelina says, good night all. Thanks for the show. Thank you, Evelina, for coming. You'll see what happens with Hezbollah. Yes, we will. Trump will probably cut off the budget for schools. They probably won't have updated textbooks. Well, they'll have textbooks which don't tell the truth. Of course, the textbooks at present don't tell the truth. Doc, we cannot make iPhones for $10. Well, it looks like Elon is going to offer iPhones for, good phones, very good smartphones, which can easily compete with iPhones and with better cameras. And he's planning to offer them here in just a few weeks for a price of $357. 1/3 of the price, of an iPhone. Now, I don't know where he's making the iPhones, whether he's making in one of his factories here, or whether he's making them at factories in Mexico or factories in China. I've seen it so far, Doc. We haven't gone to war alone yet. Well, we haven't. I mean, it's quite a long time. You're looking back. Uh, when we recently had a war, the last time we were directly involved in a war, it was back, okay, in the 1990s. Now, in Ukraine, it's a proxy war, and we haven't, um, uh, uh, gone to that proxy war alone. That's true. But of course, uh, the other European nations, except for Ukraine, didn't have to send their sons to die in that war. Frosty says, but Doc, those phones are made in China. Well, I don't know. If you may be right, they're made in China. I don't know where they're made. Okay, Musk is making televisions now also, very technically capable televisions that are currently retailing at Walmart for $179. Okay, I think they're very high quality. I don't know where those are made, but I do know he has plants now here in the United States, and that uh, he's managing to produce cars here in the United States. I'm sure he can produce other things here too. Even in the Iraq War, we didn't go alone. And in Afghanistan, we didn't go alone either. But Friar Steve, we didn't accomplish our objectives in Iraq, and we didn't accomplish our objectives in Afghanistan. Neither war was a successful war. And since those wars wound down, we haven't sent our troops in force to any other war. And if we try to send our troops into West Asia, okay, I don't think the Europeans are going to back us in that. I don't think the Australians are going to send any troops to Palestine. I don't think any of the Asian countries are going to send troops to Palestine. It's just going to be us. Afghanistan was a NATO op, and we got our asses kicked. Okay, I think that's enough for tonight. We can go on talking about this again and again, and we're going to disagree on everything. So let us agree to disagree. Okay, I will be back on Tuesday for sure. I don't know whether you're going to have a show tomorrow night, Dee. Are you planning one?
I'm going to see what's happening. I wasn't planning one, but if you feel like having one, I'll have one. If there's
Okay,
something.
I think I'd rather not have one tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Are you going to have one on Monday?
Madeline and I are going to have a show on Monday.
Okay, so you can have one then on Monday, and I will be back on Tuesday.
Yes.
So that is how things will work going forward. Fry Steve says we have an agreement over Taiwan already. We do have an agreement over Taiwan. I mean, I thought that my view of Taiwan was that it was going to be reunited with China by 2050 or before. And the way that was going to happen is that either we were not going to pressure over the situation, and China was going to wait until 2050, or we were going to start a war in the South China Sea, and then they were going to be reunited with Taiwan by 2030. So I think we have the power to shorten the time of reunification, but I don't think we have the power to lengthen it beyond the 2050 target. Solana says, good night, go Chiefs. I say go Chiefs too. I'm rooting for the Chiefs tomorrow night. Steve Wolfbrand says, good night, everyone. For our thesis, Palestine would be a different story. Jenny Dex says, good night, everyone. For our thesis, fun times, Doc. For our thesis, see you on Tuesday, Doc. Fine, for our Steve, you're welcome. So that's it, folks.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Okay. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And yes. So Dee is going to see you on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And I will see you on Tuesday. And we'll probably both see you on Wednesday.
Yes.
And we'll probably both see you on Thursday. So that seems to be the schedule we're settling down to.
I know, right?
Doc, we have been training to prevent an invasion of Taiwan for a long time. Training what?
It's crazy.
How many troops?
You have the fringe separatist group. There's a fringe separatist group. Most people in Taiwan, they consider themselves, I mean, they are. Technically, they're Chinese. And
Right.
they have relatives over in China and everything else.
And one of their major parties, the called Mingdong Party, is for the reunification of China and Taiwan. Some think it may happen in 2027. I don't think it'll happen in 2027.
You know, it's just a separatist group that the U.S., you know, talks to all the time, the separatist group.
Now, the separatist group is talked to by the U.S. and supported financially by the U.S., but they win elections, national elections. And until that changes, you'll probably keep getting the same kind of BS we have now. So, there is that. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Okay, good night, Dee.
Yes, good night, and good night, everyone.
And thank you for sticking with it.
You're welcome. Good night.